The narrative today revolves around an inmate renowned for his repeated jailbreaks, defying even the strictest of security measures. The central figure is Suzuki, considered the most perilous inmate in Japan, currently incarcerated in the nation's most fortified penitentiary. Once the patrol guards on their inspection rounds had departed, Suzuki cracked a sly grin, extracted a tooth, and made his getaway. By the time the guards circled back for another round of checks, Suzuki had vanished. Although there was a lingering suspicion of his presence, Suzuki was skilled in evasion. He stealthily navigated through the darkness in silence. Upon a subsequent inspection of the solitary cell, the guards came to the realization that Suzuki had indeed made his escape. The other guards were summoned at once, and it wasn't long before a throng had assembled. While Suzuki made his escape over the rooftop, the prison alarms sounded with urgency. Out of nowhere, a downpour began, leading us into a flashback. A dozen years prior, a group of inmates was transported to a penitentiary, including Suzuki, who was there to fulfill a decade-long sentence. Silent by nature, others concluded he must be speechless. A distinct inverse Mount Fuji tattoo marked his chest. Known for his jailbreaks, Suzuki had managed this feat thrice already. He was confined to a diminutive chamber with just a skylight, which he observed intently, a plan likely forming in his head. The guards reassured Warden Mr. Kane Mura that escaping from there was improbable for Suzuki, yet he had already fled by the time they peered through the pane. The warden commanded a lockdown of the city to prevent Suzuki's escape, but the guards apprehended him in merely 20 minutes. For reasons unknown, Suzuki was found sprinting directly along the railroad tracks. Subsequently, he was confined again to the identical chamber, now with his hands in cuffs. A guard, glancing in, saw Suzuki asleep with his face covered by a sheet. Irritated, the guard insisted Suzuki remove the sheet as he didn't want to overlook any potential threat. But when Suzuki persistently ignored the command, the guards collectively subjected him to a harsh beating. The following morning, the warden reviewed Suzuki's entire history. He noticed a pattern that Suzuki was consistently apprehended on railway tracks after his jailbreaks. During a nocturnal patrol with the guards, the warden was astonished to find that Suzuki had managed to unfasten his handcuffs. Frustrated, the guards assaulted him, demanding to know how he had removed them, but Suzuki maintained his silence. He was subjected to another harsh beating. One day, Suzuki was fiddling with a small wire he had managed to sneak into the jail. It's a mystery how he got the wire in. Did he hide it in his mouth? No, it was actually concealed in the poop. He used this wire to unlock his handcuffs. Later, when the warden took a week off and went home, Suzuki saw his chance to flee. He pulled out the wire and worked on the lock. Shortly, a guard arrived to check in. The guard glanced in and observed Suzuki seemingly asleep, face covered, and left without uttering a word. However, Suzuki wasn't actually there. He had camouflaged himself like a lizard on the ceiling, biding his time to break free. Once the guard was gone, Suzuki climbed up, struck a fragile part of the ceiling, and made his getaway. Once the guards realized what had happened, they quickly activated the sirens, and the warden was informed right away. He left his home and rushed back to the prison. By the following morning, while the police were devising a strategy to catch Suzuki, the warden showed up. He instructed them to forget all other strategies and just send a team to search the train tracks nearby. The officers doubted his judgment, wondering if the old warden had lost his senses. Is he out of his mind? Surely he doesn't expect to find him in the same spot every time. Nevertheless, when the warden convinced them of his absolute certainty about Suzuki's location, they took his advice and dispatched a team. To their surprise, the warden's hunch was correct. Suzuki was apprehended once again near the train tracks. He seems to exhibit great intelligence when breaking out of jail, as if he's faster than a computer, but it's unclear why he falters later. Due to the warden's shrewd actions leading to Suzuki's capture, he was rewarded with a promotion. Now a high-ranking officer, he was responsible for auditing prisoner conditions in jails nationwide. Suzuki, on the other hand, managed to flee again but was once again apprehended on the railway tracks. Despite being moved annually to increasingly secure prisons, he consistently found ways to elude capture, which led the media to dub him the star jailbreaker, making him well known across the nation. After 12 years, Suzuki was transferred to Central Jail, kept under strict surveillance with 10 guards dedicated to watching him. His cell was solidly constructed of cement and had multiple locks on its door. This was the very isolation cell mentioned at the start of our tale. With the guards gone, Suzuki surveyed his surroundings, gearing up for yet another escape attempt. A guard delivered Suzuki's meal to his cell, but Suzuki quickly overpowered him and slapped on the handcuffs. Alerted by the guard's whistle, more guards rushed in and subjected Suzuki to a brutal beating. Regaining consciousness, Suzuki observed the guards exiting as drops of his blood fell onto the metal bars. The following day, the guards further secured his handcuffs to prevent him from unlocking them again. Before departing, they gave Suzuki another round of beatings. Suzuki's days were filled with these incidents. He would intentionally antagonize the guards, receive a beating, and then his blood would end up staining the bars. One day, Suzuki was assaulted by the guards to the extent that he lost a tooth. He retrieved it and smiled peculiarly, giving the impression that it was all in line with his scheme. He then used his tooth to etch something onto the wall. Weeks later, after assaulting yet another guard, Suzuki was subjected to an extreme penalty. They secured him with an extended chain and suspended him. A year went by and Suzuki was still enduring his sentence. His physical state had gotten worse, with his body starting to rot and maggots infesting his sores. Eventually, one evening, the guards released him from his chains, and for the first time in a year, he experienced a moment of reprieve. At the same time, the previous warden, Mr. Kanemura, arrived to conduct an inspection. He observed the appalling condition of Suzuki in the isolation cell but chose to disregard it and departed. That night arrived, which marked the beginning of our tale. With thunder crackling in the background, Suzuki put his escape plan into action. He took out his tooth and used it to unscrew his handcuffs. Actually, Suzuki had been sharpening his tooth against the wall, not etching anything, so that he could use it to undo the screws. Once he was free from the handcuffs, he moved to the door and began to push against the metal bars, which had become rusty from continuous blood drips. Within moments, the bars broke and Suzuki made his escape from the prison. Following this, the narrative shifts to the origins of Suzuki's life. His mother died at his birth, and with his father incarcerated, he grew up in his relatives' care. Once, as Suzuki was training in the forest, he spotted a man coming towards him from afar. It turned out to be his father. They spent some time conversing until Suzuki spotted a Mount Fuji tattoo on his father's chest. Their reunion was cut short when policemen showed up, intent on arresting Suzuki's father. They immediately fled towards the railway tracks. Suzuki made a vow that day to reunite with his father someday. Currently, Suzuki was found escaping yet again, racing along the railway tracks. Mr. Kanemura shouted for him to stop from behind, and to everyone's surprise, Suzuki halted. A squad of guards quickly apprehended him and took him into custody. The nation's most secure prison had failed to contain Suzuki, prompting Mr. Kanemura to issue orders for his transfer to Prison Isle, known as the most perilous prison in the world. Situated in the midst of the ocean with constantly strong currents and significantly without any railway tracks, the surrounding waters were teeming with sharks, making the prospect of escape from Prison Isle seemingly impossible. Inside the prison, the situation was just as dangerous, with thousands of guards positioned all around. They were given strict instructions to shoot any escaping inmates immediately. Upon Suzuki's arrival, he was quickly secured in his cell, which wasn't so much a room as a series of bars arranged tightly around his body, making it impossible for him to even shift slightly, much less escape. Meanwhile, Kanemura went to the prison library to dig up information on Suzuki. He came across some old records and started going through them. In the prison, Suzuki remained still and focused. While escape seemed impossible for everyone else, Suzuki was plotting his own course. He managed to dislocate his shoulders and slowly began to squeeze through a tiny opening. Another prisoner witnessed his escape attempt but was too inebriated to speak up. At this location, Kanemura was continuing his research when the jail alarms started blaring. Rather than getting concerned, the jail warden was pleased as there seemed to be no escape route. Additionally, all the guards might have an opportunity today to shoot a prisoner from above. Mr. Khan attempted to clarify that Suzuki wasn't an average prisoner, but the guard disregarded his explanation. The next morning, guards armed with guns were deployed across the entire island on the warden's instructions. Mr. Kanemura arrived and disclosed that Suzuki's real purpose was to locate his imprisoned father on the same island. This revelation stunned everyone, as it was discovered that all previous events were part of Suzuki's deliberate plan. Escaping from jail multiple times was a strategic move by Suzuki to finally reach the prison isle and release his father. Eventually, Suzuki succeeded in meeting his father after many years, leading to an emotional reunion between them. Regrettably, Mr. Kanemura was en route with the warden and the rest of the guards, but prior to their arrival, Suzuki had already escaped with the elderly man. Suzuki escorted his father to the shoreline of the island where he had previously readied a paraglider. Both of them then boarded the paraglider and flew off. Meanwhile, Mr. Kanemura attempted a conversation with an elderly man imprisoned alongside Suzuki's father. Notably, he observed a Mount Fuji tattoo on the man's chest, indicating that despite years of effort, Suzuki mistakenly took the wrong person. It's an unfortunate turn of events beyond anyone's control. Could you handle such distress for your father? Share your thoughts in the comments.